We're here to talk about the 20 greatest Jewish films of all
rather
time.
than the 20 pieces of clothing,
Oy
the clothings that start revolution. I'm not sure a kippah has ever managed it. Or a tullus. Tullus in the machine. That would probably stop things. A little braided tullus. Or in a machine. Yes, we are going to talk about the 20 greatest Jewish films of all time. Well, according to a new survey. This is which has been conducted by Jewish Renaissance magazine to coincide with the 20th anniversary of the UK Jewish Film Festival, which we've covered on this show a few times, and to coincide with Jewish New Year, which it is on... When am I going to my mum's? Sunday. That's how I know.
Happy New Year.
Because I'm going to mum's.
Right.
Thank you very much. Shana Tova, we say.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of Happy New Years, aren't there, in London that you have to learn how to say.
You do. Chinese New Year, you have to say. Gong Hei Fat Choi.
I know that one.
Depends, though. You see, I've been saying that, but apparently that's the Cantonese version. And then
so you don't get anything?
Nothing. If you're up in these days,
Mandarin, nothing. No one's going to know what you're saying. Well, Shana Tova goes to our Jewish listeners, and it's always quite a good time of year, seasons of mist and mellow fruitfulness, and there's a kind of a will to kind of look back over the year and then look forward. So 20 Jewish films that have kind of changed. This is not going to be the same. If you did the same thing in America, I think you get a very different sort of selection of movies, because American Jews have a sort of more out there kind of attitude, and it's certainly in the film industry as well. American Jews kind of have run the thing for years, and so the Jewish figures in American cinema have been more prominent. I think with UK cinema, they've been much more sort of under the radar and much less kind of involved. Although cinema has been important to Anglo Jewry for many, many years, and the East End had thousands of cinemas in a way. I mean, that Whitechapel, you could sort of go to about 8 cinemas along there. There's only one now. It's got a few screens, mind you, the Genesis. But yes, so that involvement is rather different. So it's been rather nice to be involved. As I'm film editor of the Jewish Renaissance magazine, so it's been rather nice to be involved with seeing what British Jews have kind of been suggesting. Of course, we've had suggestions from all over the world as well.
Yeah, they don't have to be British Jewish.
No, that would be a very small pond of films as well, like The Small World of Sammy Lee.
Yeah.
Espresso Bongo, when Lawrence Harvey plays a sort of Jewish...
It's the one about the boy who's bar mitzvah falls on the day of the World Cup final. Yeah,
Jack Rosenthal. The Evacuees was another Jack Rosenthal classic about kids evacuated from Manchester.
As an Arsenal fan, would you count the glory days?
I would have to. I would think that would definitely sort of fall under the Sarah Sugarman was in it.
Yeah.
So I mean, you sort of take your Jews where you can as a British Jewish watcher. It's delighted to see that the list has come out. I mean, I don't know. You've been talking, people have been sort of emailing in and talking about it, and there are, I think that the sort of nature of Jewish cinema has changed quite a lot in recent years, over these 20 years, because I think Israeli cinema has kind of really risen up and become quite a major force in world cinema. Some people would prefer it not to be that way and say that it's kind of built on whatever people politically level at Israel. But I don't think you should attack its cinema for that. Most of the films tend to be very radical and sort of attacking of the system, and tend to be very sort of liberal in their views of the sort of Palestinian situation. So those films, I think, have been major works over the last 20 years that have arisen and have been shown at the UK Jewish Film Festival. I think you've had films from France as well that have been very inquisitive as to their kind of brand of Jewry, which is an interesting place because they have both Ashkenazi and Sephardi Jews. So you have the cinema of the sort of North African continent, the Moroccan and the Egyptian type cinema, Tunisian. So a lot of Jews came from there, but they're in France more than they are in the UK. So it's an interesting sort of pot of stuff. And then you've got your classics.
You've got
your Mel Brookses and your Woody Allens.
Yeah.
Which you could have done a sort of top. You could, between them, Mel Brooks, Billy Wilder, and
is there a
Woody
subset
Allen.
of the Shtetl films?
I like a Shtetl film.
Yeah.
I think there are. I mean, it was a kind of a major thing. I mean, Shtetl art is a major sort of, from Marc Chagall
I love Chagall.
to Isaac Bashevis Singer, for example. Those stories kind of, I suppose they're the ones that you get, certainly I did, get drummed into. And certainly by a film like Fiddler on the Roof, which is kind of the ultimate Shtetl musical.
Should we play a bit?
Probably the only Shtetl musical.
No, what? There isn't there another one? I don't know. Let's play this one. A Jewish piece of music sung in a very un-Jewish style.
That's Broadway for you, Robert. That is Broadway. A Yentas. Nice. A Yentas like Herbert, really, around our way. I mean, that sort of fussy Jewish woman in the community who's always kibutzing and putting people together and interfering is a right Yenta.
Right.
So I haven't heard that word for a while, actually. I think that film, Fiddler on the Roof, is the one film that is sort of... it's kind of a set text. It has to be seen,
Right.
because I think it's rather brilliant. It's directed by Norman Jewison in 1967, so it's got kind of hippie vibe to it. Actually, if you see it now, it looks amazing in Technicolor. Of course, it ran around on Broadway and on the London stage, and Topol played it on stage, and he played it in on the film as well. And it's sort of the role that sort of stuck with him all his life. I mean, he can't really do anything else. Yes, he was in Flash Gordon as well, but he really was stuck playing this character who's kind of the paterfamilias of a family in the shtetl during the pogroms in Russia. And it starts with him everyone's having a go at him because he's going to be late for the Shabbos, because he has to get the cow home with the milk, and everyone sings tradition. And I could have played all of those tradition. He's the one that sings If I Were a Rich Man.
Yeah.
And they've kind of stuck almost like a stigma, like a stereotype to the Jewish community from those. But if you see the film, then you sort of realize the kind of, the horrors of the pogroms, the horrors of the persecution. It kind of, it sticks to a Jewish mind and goes with it throughout its life. I mean, everyone had to see Fiddler on the Roof. I mean, you had to see it like 5 or 6 times. And, every sort of Sunday school, Hebrew school kind of puts on their own production. But some of the songs are great, great Broadway standards. Now, Sunrise, Sunset, which I think Miles Davis even covered, become jazz standards. And If I Were a Rich Man is a kind of classic. But because they're written in that kind of that kind of Ashkenazi harmonic scale, I think that it's one of the brilliant films. So I have to reveal that actually probably is the most Jewish musical of all time. I mean, there's Yentl as well with Barbra Streisand,
which wasn't that considered quite a flop? Didn't it cost a lot of money?
It cost a lot of money, and it was a bit of a vanity project for her. But I don't think it is. I don't think
is it any good?
It's all right, but it's a little bit Barbra Streisand-y. But she dresses as as a boy to get into the yeshiva. So it's kind of about female empowerment within that religion. And whereas the females in Fiddler on the Roof do this kind of, let's sing about matchmakers and marrying the rabbi's son. And Paul Michael Glaser is the one in the Fiddler on the Roof who becomes the teacher, and he becomes a sort of bit of a Bolshevik. He's accused of being. So Fiddler on the Roof is the one, and it actually sort of doesn't surprise me that the generation of readers of Jewish Renaissance magazine have voted Fiddler on the Roof to be the greatest Jewish film, and I sort of can't
more
really
so
argue
than Annie
with
Hall.
It. Well, Annie Hall got to like number 3.
Did it?
Yeah, which is fine. That opens with the words Jew eat yet. I distinctly heard him, Max. He said Jew eat yet. So that's about Jewish paranoia. Schindler's List is number 2.
Right.
Which sort of gets, I think, by default of being unarguable with, in a way. I think it's. What's the shibboleth? I think that might be a Jewish word.
I think it is.
It does sound like one, but it's one of those things that you can't. That it's kind of there and you can't argue with it. And it's not my favourite, but it is, of course, shocking. And it's sort of like, well, if you don't like Schindler's List, that means you support the Holocaust. No, not of course.
No,
you could. It's a Spielberg version of the Holocaust. It's not Son of Saul, for example, and it's not the Shoah, the Claude Lanzmann documentary, which comes in at number 7 on the list. And actually, Son of Saul, which was a very recent film, probably the most recent film on the list, does get in there at number 16. And I think over time that may be the one that may work its way up. But what Spielberg did was make the Holocaust understandable to a new generation, and almost the work that he did around Schindler's List, setting up the Shoah Foundation and the Holocaust museums around Europe, has been more important. It's probably been his life. If you speak to Spielberg now, Jaws, E.T., Close Encounters, BFG, the one that he would like to take to his grave is Schindler's List, and he really did do some great work around that historically as well. So I don't think there's a reason that gets in there.
Did Susie Gold make it in there?
That's one of those British films that didn't. It
wasn't. According to Kevin, it wasn't British jury's finest hour.
It was not really. No, it's one of those ones that sticks to you like a stigma.
Wasn't there a recent one about a Jewish boxer?
Yeah, there was the Orthodox. Yeah, with Stephen Graham playing the Jewish boxer. There are more and more of these films that sort of come out. I mean, the one that I'm delighted to see gets in there, mainly because I voted for it quite high, is Louis Malle's Au revoir les enfants, which is not such a it's a Jewish film, but it's about Jewish kids being kept in a Catholic seminary during the war. They were hidden in this Catholic school, and then the Catholic school, the Nazis come visiting. Someone betrays these Jewish kids. It's one of the most heartbreaking films, but it's a great film about childhood and memory. But it actually happened to Louis Malle, and even though he was a huge filmmaker in the 1960s, it took him till 87 to make this film. It was almost the recovered memory, which is very sort of familiar in France. People didn't talk about that stuff.
There's those sort of British post-war East End films, which are kind of not Jewish but sort of are. Like someone said, A Kid for Two Farthings.
And a Sparrow
with Wolf Mankiewicz.
Yeah, which Wolf Mankiewicz was writing, and Joseph Mankiewicz was doing the screenplays. And there was the Kid for Two Fathers, where Alfie Bass was in a lot of them. Sparrows Can't Sing as well is often held up as a Jewish film. You can't quite see the Jews in them, and that's what's interesting about them. Espresso Bongo is another one of those, which Lawrence Harvey definitely plays a Jewish guy, and it starts with him getting salt beef bagels in a Soho salt beef bar, which is as Jewish as it gets, and he keeps talking about schmindricks and schmocks and all of this all the way through it. But the story itself isn't Jewish. And sometimes that's sort of the way you're going to populate the piece with Jewish characters. It was Jack Rosenthal, I think, that first put it on the mainstream, and that's why those films are so legendary. That
but it's also, I think, it's the way. I was talking about old expressions that my mum, old London expressions, and there were quite a lot that had sort of Yiddish in them because that was just part of the fabric, wasn't it? In the same way as we talk about, Jamaican kind of, if
nowadays it would be Jamaican,
then it would have been Yiddish. Would have been very much part of the fabric, and it's true of the fabric of those films. They're not Jewish films, but they wouldn't be there without the Jewish element.
Absolutely. And I think there's a film coming out at the London Film Festival that's been restored. Sammy Lee, what's it called? What's something about Sammy Lee?
Sammy Lee, the thingy of Sammy Lee. It's a Soho film.
Yeah, it's a Soho film with Anthony Newley.
Yeah,
very Jewish film as well. I can't remember The Sorrows of Sammy Lee. I can't remember what it is. The Small something of Sammy Lee.
Small World of Sammy Lee. No, I can't remember.
And I was just talking about it just now. Anyway, but then there's The Pianist, which is at number 4.
It is the Small World.
It is the Small World of Sammy Lee, because it's his small world, because he has to. He's in Hock, so he has to kind of invent all these schemes over one night. And it's kind of like After Hours, but set in Jewishish Soho. The Pianist, Roman Polanski's memoir of I suppose the Polish ghetto, Krakow ghetto, which starred Adrian Brody and won the Palme d'Or in 2002, is our number 4 film. And that's an extraordinary film as well, in which Maureen Ipman and Frank Finlay kind of coexist as the sort of parents in this film to Adrian Brody's extraordinary performance, I think, in the lead. It's a film that kind of divided people because it's almost a sentimental movie, not what people want from their Polanski, but I think sometimes when you're dealing with raw memories, and this is actually Polanski's kind of childhood, from that ghetto, you don't want to stylize them too much. You kind of tell them as straight as you can, and I think that's what the Pianist does, and that's why it's still got a power today. And at number 6 is one of my favorites as well, is the Coen brothers' A Serious Man, which is also quite a recent movie, and is their first kind of attempt to really deal with their Jewry as well. They made hundreds. They made 15 films or whatever till they got to this one, and suddenly they were doing Jews. And this one that one starts with a shtetl story, a ghetto story of a dybbuk going around. And there's been dybbuks in the East End before as well, haven't they? And golems, mythical Jewish creatures like Yentas, but not quite as powerful. So
I used the word golem yesterday evening for some reason.
What, in polite conversation?
Yeah, just talking to Alfie, and he looked at me as if I was mad. I talked about someone being like a golem rising from the streets. Right. I don't know where that came from.
There's a film coming out soon, the Limehouse Golem, which is coming out soon. It was a Peter Ackroyd novel.
It's a Peter Ackroyd book. Yeah.
Absolutely. So
Dan Leno and the Limehouse Golem.
Yes, the book, and I think the film is just called The Limehouse Golem. So there are other films in there. Chariots of Fire, people might remember, which is Eric Liddell, of course, couldn't run on the who couldn't run? No, it was the other guy.
The Christian guy couldn't run on the Sunday.
Yeah. And the Jewish guy couldn't run on Saturday. Why can't we have the race on a Monday? I always wondered, but that's very much about British society running around Tom Quad and that kind of latent racism, I think. There's a lovely film in there called, which I'd forgotten about, The Frisco Kid, which is great Robert Aldrich movie with the late Gene Wilder. He's fantastic in that one. That's a real with Harrison Ford as well. Very, very funny film. Comedy, obviously, look in there. Great. The Producers, Mel Brooks, but again Gene Wilder in there, and some Israeli films that you might have heard of. Ushpizin, which I think is a rather fine film. Waltz with Bashir, the animation film, which is directed by Ari Folman. And kind of is a sort of ghostly memory of the 1982 Lebanon War, and the Israeli comedy The Band's Visit. There are many, many more entries that have come in. I mean, people were talking about, we had Mike Leigh kind of contributing his own. He was suggesting Radio Days by Woody Allen. And I think there are probably more Woody Allen movies in there. But Annie Hall sort of made my favourite, my most Jewish Woody Allen film is Crimes and Misdemeanors, actually, which is
Once Upon a Time in America not a great Jewish
Yeah,
film?
it is. It is.
Is
And
that not in the list?
It isn't in the list, funnily enough, because it is a great film.
It's a truly great film.
As is Bugsy, which is a sort of Jewish gangster film as well.
But Once Upon a Time in America is specifically very, very Jewish.
The thing, but it's about Jewish gangsters, noodles, isn't it? But it isn't. Watching it isn't. It's very Italian.
I guess,
because it's Sergio Leone. Sergio Leone.
Sergio Leone, of course.
But it looks like Scorsese or Coppola.
Yeah.
And you're never quite sure
De Niro.
and you're never quite sure how Jewish everyone is. James Woods, is he Jewish? I think it's sort of one of those films that non-Jews are doing a Jewish story. So it isn't quite held up as the Jewish story as you think it might be, and yet it is. I remember watching it the first time. I was like, this is Jewish, is it? Right? It doesn't sound Jewish. I mean, that beautiful score.
It's got barrels of pickles in it.